Hola clase, ¿cómo están? ¿Están felices? Sí. I use the lab every day. I'll introduce topics in the classroom and then we'll bring down the lab. And what I love about it is that I can get the kids to practice and use the language with each other. It's such a convenient system that I can bring it down and we can use it for 5 to 10 minutes, take it back up, go back to work. And I want them to pair up and work again with a variety of partners without losing the time of going and finding a partner.
Amigos, ¿cuál es la primera pregunta? Apachurra tu botón si sabes cuál es la primera pregunta.
The kids have an opportunity to use the language every day in the classroom. The lab really gives them the chance to work with a variety of partners. Kids tend to migrate towards their friends or towards people they're used to working with. And what the lab has done, it's forced them a little bit out of that circle of comfort, and they have to work with people that they're not familiar with.
Normally, when it says pair up, you'd find the same person, and so there's a possibility that both of you can have the same problem in the language, and so you never learn off of that, but when you work with other people, you start to learn more off the language.
It forces them to use the language to get to know patterns or people that they otherwise don't know.
And if you talk with the same people all the time when you're comparing your answers, you can build language patterns that could be incorrect.
It forces John to work with Susan, and they would never have otherwise communicated.
I think the random pairing of partners is good for students. They probably feel like they can try without failing. They're willing to make the risk because they know others are doing the same thing. And they know that only maybe 1 or 2 other people are listening to them rather than speaking in front of the whole class, making mistakes, and then perhaps being self-conscious about those mistakes.
Like, if you're wrong, you don't have to be intimidated by that. Like, it's very casual and it's okay to make mistakes. And that's how you learn the language, is through your mistakes.
And if they're like afraid of confrontation, then they can kind of just say it without anybody looking at them weird or saying if they say something wrong, it's not really bad for them to say it.
Language acquisition requires trial and error, and it requires speaking. And kids are inhibited to speak to their peers in large groups in a foreign language. But when they're paired up, it's much more intimate, and they don't feel that pressure as much.
¿Come en la clase? No come en la clase, pero tengo un taco.
I don't have the language lab in my room, and I wish I did, because I would be able to use it a lot more. I use it every once in a while. We have to switch classes, and that does cause quite a bit of confusion with the students and how we have to switch classes, and it's chaos for the second until we get them settled down, and then we switch back. And
it is such an effective classroom management tool. I don't lose any time getting people on task.
Any teacher who has to switch classrooms knows that the kids just get riled up as soon as they stand up and start walking around. They talk to each other.
So it increases the amount of time that I can stay on task and in the language. I don't lose time with kids wandering around. Es casi perfecto.
I feel that the speaking really helps because you get to experiment with the language and see where your problems are and where you can fix yourself.
And so this is more of the teaching with speaking, and you learn more about the language, not just the words.
And it just gives you the chance to practice instead of just writing words on a worksheet.
You don't get good at doing that activity unless you do it, unless you practice. And where it comes to speaking and listening to the language, again, the lab just provides more opportunity to spend more time focused on the language. So this would be a setup, say, of a typical classroom. I've given them a prompt. They're ready to work together. I can choose to click on a random button. It'll randomly assign them. Now, if I wanted to listen to those conversations, I would click on a student, and I automatically will end up listening to the student and whoever that student is paired with. And if they had a question and they push their button, I would have an exclamation point icon, and then I click again, I can mic into that conversation and answer their question or address whatever their concern is. And I'm only interrupting that conversation. The rest of the students, they can continue to work without interruption. Another feature that I really enjoy, I can record any activity and then use it as a sample for any kind of assessment, a formative assessment or summative assessment.
I've seen teachers do this. They sit down one-on-one with student. and listen to them. These labs afford the opportunity just to have everyone do it all at once and then listen to them, a quick check, and move on.
The oral assessment usually takes, 20 minutes to record all of them, tops. I think it's great because I can just go in there and record all of their assessments all at one time, and then I can just look at them later, which saves a ton of time.
As a teacher, that proximity is an important tool. By being close to students as they're working, they tend to stay on task. And I've noticed over the years that you're close to a particular group of students and they're working, but because you have that teacher's intuition that the group on the other side of the room isn't working. This resolves all that problem because I can be listening to them at any point in time and they don't know it. And I tell them that frequently. I tell them I might be monitoring your work, your effort to use the language to complete the task that I've given you.
When you know that he could be listening into you at any moment, you feel more inclined to talk in Spanish and just experiment with the language more.
Yeah, and if you're messing around with Language Lab, he can record it and show your parents.
That puts students in the hot seat and gives them an opportunity to perform better.
Yeah, it's a little motivator to make sure you're keeping on task.
They work a lot harder. They're more accountable for the work that they do. And I love that change to the classroom. Sometimes they groan about that, I admit it, but as a teacher, I love that aspect of the lab.
You wouldn't think of building a clothing lab without machines to sew clothing. The machines that help us in language acquisition are valuable if they give students an opportunity to speak more and be evaluated more carefully. So definitely, I think it would be a very valuable asset to have language labs in every single new school, and for policymakers to find a way to make available language labs for existing schools.